Hello everyone, amateur meteorologist. First and weather here. It is October 29th, 2020. And now finally, welcome to part 3 of my winter or my preliminary winter forecast. This is the last series or last video in my 3-part series, and today I'll just really be going in depth, showing you guys all the maps, my forecast, what I think in terms of precip, temperature, and snowfall for this upcoming winter. And it looks pretty interesting, so let's get right to it. First off, though, before we really go dive deep into the forecast, with every single winter, there are always wildcards. No single season is the same as any other season. No matter how similar the analog years are, the sea surface temperatures are, it's never the same. And so this winter especially, there are a few certain wildcards that I think are quite important that could really wreak havoc in my winter forecast. First of all, a more easterly based La Nina. I don't think this is that likely, but if it does happen, it's a remote possibility that if we do see a more east-based La Nina, I do think we would have a higher chance for some more high-latitude blocking and henceforth some more troughing and below-average heights in the eastern part of the country and a more active subtropical jet stream and some more phasing going on, delivering snowfall to the mid-Atlantic. However, right now that does not look very likely at all. Number 2, sunspot activity. We are currently seeing very low sunspot activity, but we've been seeing that now for the past 5 years, and we really haven't had much of anything in terms of high latitude blocking in the past 5 years. So I really do think the correlation between that is quite low. However, of course, there is still some pretty significant correlation from many years past. How much that is influencing years now is to be debated. So it definitely is a wild card, but I don't really see it being a likely wild card. Number 3, the record low Arctic sea ice. So the Arctic sea ice for 2020 has just broken records, just blowing 2012 in the water with the very unusually record amounts of low Arctic sea ice. And there is some conflicting evidence as to whether that can promote cooler weather in the lower 48 during winter, or whether that enhances warmer weather. It does look like, however, that record low Arctic sea ice does sometimes help promote some more troughing in the east and especially the central U.S. in the latter portion of winter, especially March. And I'll get into that later. Number 4, the whiplash of the record strong polar vortex last year. So everything this year is pointing to a strong polar vortex. The chances of seeing a significant stratospheric warming event and a split in the polar vortex is very low this year. However, many of you might remember that last year we had one of the strongest polar vortexes on record. I'm talking unbelievable strong polar vortex, record positive AO values, some of the highest positive AO Arctic oscillation values we've seen since we began keeping track of the AO. And so the atmosphere is basically like a seesaw. It's going to react one way equally violently if it's pushed in the opposite direction. And so after last year, when we saw that huge strengthening of the polar vortex, it does beg the question, will we see the exact opposite this year as a way for the atmosphere to sort of balance itself out? Again, everything else points to a strong polar vortex, but this is something you cannot just eliminate as a possibility. And so then that takes me to my 5th point, which is a prolonged stratospheric warming event, which is not out of the question. The past few La Nina winters have produced those, but they have not been prolonged and they've been relatively short-lived. So again, I think the bottom 2 things are the biggest potential wild cards this winter that could mess up the forecast, but I do think right now that the chances of those happening are not terribly high. Now, what you see here is the month of December. I compiled 4 analog years, 1998, 2008, 2007, and 2016. And this is how it looked like for those 4 years in the month of December. You can see that we had a very strong amplified ridge in the Pacific and a very negatively tilted trough that basically swung all the way from Greenland into the northwestern Pacific, very strongly positive NAO. big southeast ridge, so the entire eastern United States a blowtorch during December, according to these analogs, and very cool in the northwestern portion of the country. And so this pattern, upper air pattern for December, would indicate a very fast flowing jet stream right here, bring lots of wet weather essentially to this area right here, which is the upper Midwest, and drier conditions to the southeast, mid-Atlantic, and also northeast, especially coastal regions. Not to mention, the southwest would also be looking pretty dry under this setup. And you can see from the temperature anomalies on the right, this is indeed what ended up happening. We had very warm conditions in essentially this diagonal split of the lower 48. So very warm here, and then cooler in the Montana region, Colorado, Idaho, Washington State, Oregon, and even California, Nevada, and Utah. But I think especially this winter, the cold risk will be really focused up a bit further to the north. Now, going to January, I think this is the one month where we really might see that troughing dive deeper down into the heartland of the country and even maybe cross the Mississippi. I think this is if it's going to happen, this would be the one month where we could really see some sort of troughing develop in the central United States and even push a bit eastward. But again, then you look at Greenland, and you can see that distinctly positive NAO below normal heights over Greenland, a big, nice ridge right here, allowing for that jet stream to really then, after that trough, basically just become very zonal, allowing still mild Pacific air to intrude into the southern U.S., with those cooler conditions really being focused in the northern third of the country. One thing I do want to point out is I think these areas right here, the Ohio Valley, and to the southwest of that, states like Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio. I think January is the one month where you might have a bunch of Appalachian runner systems go to your east and deliver some nice, pretty good snowstorms for these areas right here. I think for the most of the winter, you guys will also be in sort of the warm sector for the majority of storm tracks. But there is some indication that in the month of January, you could see those storm tracks phase a little bit right here and run to your east, delivering some pretty good snows in that time period. But again, a lot would have to go right for that to happen, but I think it certainly is a possibility. And again, cooler in the Pacific Northwest and states like North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Minnesota, and Iowa. Now going into February, this is where it really gets warm for most of the country. You can see on the upper level of the 500 millibar geopotential height map right here, substantial troughing in the Pacific Northwest once again, and then a more expansive broad ridge that encompasses most of the lower 48. And when you look at the analogs right here, very warm from Texas to the Midwest, the Great Plains region, the Southeast, the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast. And the only area that would see below average conditions, or even a hint of that, would be the extreme western portions of the United States. Those areas being Seattle, Portland, western Oregon, and extreme portions of northwestern California. So the way it looks right now, February really won't be that wintry of a month. Once you go essentially east of basically east of California, I think this month will be flooded by warm, mild Pacific air. And you can see that with the jet stream orientation. So you have a very amplified jet stream right here, but then after that, it has a very zonal-like flow with that trough and then that very straight ridge right here, allowing mild Pacific air to really flow into the rest of the country, while only these areas right here in the Northwest see any sort of cool air. And finally, now switching to March, this is the upper level pattern on the left. You can see a very strong area of above normal heights running in sort of a circle or a disc around this one area of troughing right here. And that should still allow for some below average conditions in the Northwest and a big expansive ridge over the Southwest and Texas region right here. But one thing I do want to point out is look at those above normal heights over Greenland. That is an indication of a potentially neutral to negative NAO for the month of March. And one other thing I do want to point out is with that low Arctic sea ice, there is some indication that there would be increased chances for troughing in the eastern part of the country. So I think if there's one month that we do have the chance of seeing some sort of cool weather and snowfall chances for the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, or interior portions of the Northeast, I think March would be the month to really see that. And that does sort of show up in the analogs. Those below average conditions in the Northwest, very warm conditions right here in the Southwest, But look at that, some cool air intruding into the eastern part of the country. I do think this is a bit overdone, especially for this year, but it is certainly a possibility with that high latitude blocking being indicated just slightly from the analog that we do see some sort of storms trying to form up in the Kentucky Valley region right here and then riding up the coast, which I don't really think is going to be likely at all for the majority of the winter. I think if it's going to happen, March will be the month, and I think that possibility is still quite low, but if it were to happen, it would only really be happening in this month right here. So this is sort of the wild card month for this winter. And now finally, when you combine all those analogs, you get a very warm picture for the south, southwest, southeast, mid-Atlantic, northeast, really essentially the south and eastern portions of the country are looking warm this winter, while the northwest looks cooler this winter. And you can see that reflected in the 500 millibar geopotential height. And you can see a big ridge. This has really been a constant theme in every single month, a big, strong ridge southwest of Alaska, a nice trough in the northwest, delivering that cooler Arctic air into these regions right here, while the rest of the country bakes under the influence of that persistent southeast ridge and also that positive NAO. Even in the December to March analog year, you can still see that negative below average height still comes up over Greenland, even with those March analogs pointing to above normal heights over here. So again, you can see that that very fast zonal moving jet stream in the eastern portion of the country as a major theme for this winter, and that usually allows very mild Pacific air to really flood the entire area of the country east of the Mississippi. And now here finally are the precip analogs. You can see that there's a very distinct theme right here. It's essentially a switch of the El Nino state, very dry along the southeastern portion of the country, the southern third of the United States, which extends all the way up into the mid-Atlantic, even the northeast, even the extreme coastal regions, while the Ohio Valley and interior portions of the northeast and also the Pacific Northwest are very wet. And so the middle of the country sort of stays around average or equal chances, but the two main regions that really do see very above average chances of seeing above average precip are the Ohio Valley and also the Pacific Northwest. And what this indicates to me right here is the potential for some Appalachian runner systems, like I said, in the month of January potentially, and also a very active jet stream right here as it comes out of that trough right here and then sort of makes a run for it in that zonal flow. That's going to cause a lot of precip in these regions right here. I think this might be a bit too far to the east, so I think these areas especially might be very wet this winter, as along with the Pacific Northwest. And I think the drought that we're seeing in the southwest right now in the Four Corners region is not really going to be helped out that much with those drier than normal conditions still predicted for these areas right here. And now here is just to really get an idea of how this winter will be like in terms of the precip and temperature lining up. This is the European and UK Met model. Their snowfall anomaly forecast from December 2020 to February 2021 for the winter. And you can see there's a very distinct theme right here. The Pacific Northwest running very above average in terms of snowfall, breaking the chart. And then that extends essentially in the northern third of the country, east into North Dakota, Minnesota, Idaho, Montana, and even clipping maybe just the northern, extreme northern portions of Maine. But the rest of the country stuck in below average snowfall. You can see the mid-Atlantic, northeast, even the Ohio Valley, which I disagree with just a bit, but essentially everywhere else in the country is expected to see below average snowfall according to these two models, with the only real bullseye being the Pacific Northwest and maybe the upper Midwest right here. So without further ado, here is my 2020-2021 December to March temperature forecast for this upcoming winter. And let me get a quick drink of water before I really break it down. But you can see it's a very warm outlook for most of the country. Thank you for your patience, guys. But you can see right here, I am predicting well above average temperatures for large areas of the country. Anywhere in this dark red region right here, temperatures, I would not be surprised if they average 3 to anywhere to 6 degrees above average for the entire winter. I think 6 degrees might be at the extreme end of the scale, but 3-4 is not out of the question at all. With that very persistent southeast ridge, and that positive NAO and that zonal jet stream flooding this entire area with mild Pacific air, I think if you are in the Southwest, the Texas region, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, western portions of North Carolina, Virginia, this winter is going to be an absolute blowtorch. And I think that sort of stays the exact same, not much difference for the rest of the eastern part of the country, the Northeast, including states like Maine, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, northern portions of Missouri, Kansas, northern portions of Arizona, New Mexico, the southern half of Colorado. I would not be surprised if temperature anomalies run even as much as this area right here, but I think there also is a chance of seeing anomalies run about 2 degrees above average for the winter as a whole. My forecast for this region right here in this orange shading is 2 to 4 degrees above average for the entire winter. Now, finally, moving a bit to the northwest, in this slightly above region, I think we're going to end up with seeing about anomalies 1 to 2 degrees above average for the entire winter. This includes Northern California, almost all of Nevada, Utah, southeastern Wyoming, Nebraska, South Dakota, southern regions of Minnesota, and northwestern portions of Iowa. I think you will really be sort of stuck in that battleground region with those troughs coming through, the fight between the ridge and the south. I think the one area that really could see conflicting air masses and battles between cold and warm is going to be this region right here with that southeast ridge really putting up a good fight with this troughing right here. So this area is going to see some extreme temperature swings, and this really will be the nice winter battle zone for this winter. And finally, moving to the most favorable region for seeing any sort of below average conditions for this winter, the Pacific Northwest and also northern portions of the Midwest. I think northern portions of Minnesota, North Dakota, Montana, Idaho, northwestern portions of Wyoming, and all of Washington State and Oregon. I think you guys will see slightly below to average conditions this winter from December to March, which is going to be about 0 to negative 2 degrees below average. So I think most of the country this winter is going to be under a blowtorch, especially the eastern part, and as in the further south you go, the chances of seeing above average conditions this winter increase exponentially. The only area that I really do see having a good chance to end up below average is going to be the Pacific Northwest. Now, moving to precip. The southern third of the country this winter, I'm pretty confident will run below average in precip in this orange shading, slightly below average, and I think Florida will run well below average or to below average this winter. There's two main hotspots that I think we'll see above average precip. One area is this region right here, the Ohio Valley, which includes states like Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Iowa, Kansas, Arkansas, Kentucky, Tennessee, and of course Ohio. And a bullseye sort of forming right here in this dark green right here. And of course the Pacific Northwest, which will be seeing that very strong progressive jet stream coming in from the northwest, delivering lots of above average precip and storms in these regions right here, which include states like Idaho, northern Nevada, Washington State, Oregon, and northwestern portions of Utah. And I think that bullseye for this region right here will be right along the coast, including cities like Seattle, Portland, and northwestern portions of Oregon. So with all that in mind, here is my 2021 December to March snowfall forecast for this winter. And real quick, before I dive into this, I just want to mention the areas in between here I think have equal chances for seeing above or below average precip. And you can see in this orange shading right here goes all the way up the Mid-Atlantic, the I-95 corridor, including the major cities of Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Richmond, D.C., Charlotte, and I think that really goes up all the way up until Maine. And so now, here is my 2020-2021 snowfall forecast for this winter. And you can see the main bullseye zones I have for above average snowfall is, of course, this region right here with that troughing above average precip. If you are in the Idaho region, Montana, Washington, Oregon, you guys will have the best chance for seeing above average to maybe even well above average snowfall for this winter. In between these two purple areas, I think you're going to see slightly above average snowfall, essentially in the northern third of the country. So if you're north of anywhere from Nevada to Utah to Colorado, I think states like Wyoming, all of Montana, the Dakotas will see slightly above average snowfall averaged out this winter. And I think there will also be another hotspot right here in this purple area as that jet stream sort of goes out of that trough and really extends and becomes more zonal. We're going to see a lot more convergence in this region right here and really allow for some storms to form. And so I think states like areas like southern Montana or Minnesota, Wisconsin, eastern South Dakota, and northern and northwestern Iowa, I think this could be another region where you see some above average to maybe even well above average snowfall for this winter. And also now transitioning to the southeast, notice how I have this sort of southwesterly blue shading right here, where I do think even though this area will be seeing above average to maybe even well above average conditions this winter, I think in the month of January and maybe even the first part of February, we might see sort of these Appalachian runner systems really moving up just along the Appalachian Mountains, delivering some pretty good snows to these regions. So I think it certainly is feasible that we do end up verifying average to slightly above average in terms of snowfall this winter in this region right here, which includes states like Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, and even portions of the Mississippi right here in the southern portion of this area. And finally, where I know most of my viewers are from this YouTube channel, it does not look good. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This winter might be one of the least snowy winters for the East Coast. I think it's relatively likely that we get at least a little bit more than last winter. But if you're along the I-95 corridor, the plain matter is that you need blocking to get substantial snows here. And I just do not see that happening at all, besides maybe in March. And by then, it's really sort of too late, especially areas south of DC. So I think if you're in this dark brown area right here, you're going to see well below average snowfall for this winter. And then extending out of that in this orange area, below average snowfall. So this includes Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, interior portions of New England. I think basically this winter will really be just an absolute disappointment for many snow lovers in the Mid-Atlantic and the interior or coastal regions of the Northeast, which include cities like Boston, New York, Philadelphia, DC, Richmond. Really just not looking good at all for this winter in terms of snowfall. All the storm tracks will really be sort of moving in this area right here or going through the Appalachian Mountains. And these red lines right here indicate where I think the most likely storm track locations are. So, of course, I think that those storm tracks coming in from the Pacific and then moving like this right here, delivering those heavy snows to these regions right here. And then this lighter red or this thinner red shading right here indicating those Appalachian runner systems, or that the potential at least in January. So I know it's disappointing news, but this winter just really does not look favorable at all for snowfall if you're in the eastern part of the country, especially along the I-95 corridor. Things could change. Like I said, there are those wild cards that I mentioned earlier in this video, but right now it's looking pretty likely that snowfall will be very low in those regions, with the bullseye being really just the Pacific Northwest, which has been the theme over the past few years. Most of the cold and snowfall has really been confined to these regions for the past 5-6 winters, and I do expect that trend to continue. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for my final winter forecast coming out in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for watching.